You are watching Boomer TV and today's show, Calling All Grandparents. Your help is needed. Your host is Florence Ann Romano, the Windy City Nanny, to empower parents and grandparents to let love in, build their village, and ask for help when they need it. Meantime, come aboard and join the Bloomer Boomer community. Register on the website and get updates, program schedules, member benefits, plus a lot of free merchandise. And this platform will launch you to a meaningful life after 55. And now, Florence Ann Romano.
Hello, everybody. I'm back. Did you get nervous that maybe I wasn't going to come back with all this crazy energy on this beautiful Tuesday, the first day of fall, if you can believe it or not? We had what we call fake fall here in Chicago. We had like all of a sudden this beautiful fall weather kind of blew through, and now we're back into summer here this week, and then next week we're going to go into fall again. So we always have the fake seasons for a bit in Chicago because our weather is a little manic all the time, a little polar. But I'm so glad to be back. I've been thinking about you guys since I was last here with you. I'm thinking about what we talked about last time. And what we talked about was this idea that, you need to create this balance of disciplining your grandchildren and then also indulging them. And how do you find that balance? And we had some really great conversation about what that looks like in your homes and also what your dreams are for that balance and how to have those conversations with your children, your grown children, that is. And so now this week, we're going to talk about creating those healthy boundaries with your grown children and you, the now grandparent. And this can be oftentimes a bit of a dance. And you've heard me say that before. It's a bit of a delicate dance as you try to create these boundaries. There's something very different about your children growing up and leaving your house and having families of their own, and you having to step back and play a different role in their lives. And, it's funny. I was at a wedding over the weekend, and I know people are like, oh my gosh, COVID, how are you at a wedding? But they handled it very well, I have to say. But the wedding was for my best friend's youngest sister, and she was the fourth and final child to get married. And I've known her since she was young. And so it was just so emotional and so beautiful to watch her walk down the aisle into her happily ever after. But I am very close to her parents as well. And so I got to spend some time with them at the wedding chatting, and they have all these grandchildren now, and her mother, who's now a grandmother of all these children, she watches a boatload of these kids during the week. So she's exactly in your shoes as grandparents. She's playing that role as the nanny to her grandchildren. And so I wanted to kind of get some real-time polling there at the wedding about what's going on in these homes with grandparents. And one thing that she said to me, which I thought was so interesting, was she said, you raise them to let them go, right? I've heard that phrase before, that you raise them to let them go. But she said, I feel like with my youngest getting married now that I'm done being a mom. And I was like, what do you mean you're done being a mom? I don't think that ever goes away, that the role of mom never leaves. As long as you're a mother and your children are in this world with you, you are always a mother. And so, she agreed that yes, she's still their mom, but I think what she was trying to get at and what we talked through was that it changed. Her role changed with her children. The role of mom changed. So that's what I want to challenge you guys with today is, what does the role of mom and dad look like now that your children are older? And do you have a hard time watching your children raise their children and not over inserting yourself or constantly correcting them? One of my girlfriends lives with her parents right now as they're looking for a home. And one of her biggest complaints is that her mom is constantly critiquing how she is as a parent. And, she calls me on the phone, my friend, and she's like, I just can't take it anymore. I have to get out of this house. Everything I do is wrong. Everything I do is wrong. And I can't take it anymore. I feel like I'm back living, in my parents' house, which is hysterical to me, but she feels like she's the child again, that she's not a mother, that she's not married, that she hasn't grown up or flown the coop, So I think you can get into that sticky situation with your children, because when you are in those close quarters, whether or not they're living with you, even if you're just the nanny there for your grandchildren, you are kind of forced back into this insular world with your kids. But now there's a lot of weird dynamics thrown into it about, when you should be asserting your opinion, when you shouldn't. And so I always say to parents and to grandparents, you have to pick your battles, right? You have to know when you're going to let something go and when you're going to pick to address it. And so creating these healthy boundaries has a lot to do with, and I'm sorry to admit it, has a lot to do with you having to evaluate yourself and knowing what you stand for, who you are as the role model in these children's lives, or as the role model still in your children's lives. So I can kind of use the different perspectives here from how your child is looking at you and how you are looking at your child, or your grown children rather. And I want you to think about this. When your kids are younger, you have to let them make mistakes. You have to let them fail. You have to let them fall. God forbid I use the word fail. And I've said this before. People get so upset. The word, it's like the F word. It's like a terrible, foreboding word. Never say the F word. And okay, I'm not talking about that four-letter word that everyone's talking about, which I don't think we should be using haphazardly. And when I hear kids use it, by the way, I go crazy, because why are they using that potty language when they're younger? That drives me crazy, but that's a different tangent we can go on later. But the idea is allowing your children to discover things on their own, allowing them to fail, allowing them to grow, allowing them to become who they're becoming. And I believe that that's something that happens to all of us for our whole lives, that we're constantly growing, we're constantly learning, we're constantly being challenged by things. And I don't think that changes just because you're an adult and you have your own children now. You're going to be challenged by motherhood and fatherhood. You're going to be challenged by these children that you've brought into the world in one way or another. And so the idea is, when you, the parent, when do you, the grandparent, step in and address something because you want to help support your children as they're raising their children? And what's the fine line between you putting yourself in there and over criticizing or overstepping your boundaries, whatever the case may be? How do you know when enough's enough, when it's too much, when it's too little? This is what I hear grandparents talking about all the time. And I hear the parents talking about, the parents of the children talking about, is I feel like I don't know when I should ask my parents for help with my children, when I should ask for their opinion, because is that opening the door then for that criticism, for them to step in and take over and make me feel like I'm less than, or I'm not doing it right? So that's what I want to explore with you guys. And I'm sure your minds are racing with all sorts of examples of this, but creating these healthy boundaries is really important, because in order for you to set up this trifecta that I always talk about, the parent, the child, and the caretakers, whomever they are, nannies, which can be grandparents, or they can be strangers, or they can be friends, whatever they are, this trifecta, it has to be a unified trifecta. It has to be a solid, unified example of kind of the goals and aspirations for the relationship. So let's talk through that when I come back with some questions from you about what you're dealing with in your homes with your grandchildren and your grown children, and how we can try to help smooth some of that out. So let's iron the situation out a bit. So when I come back, that's what we're going to discuss.
We'll be right back with your questions right after this. Register on the website and get updates, program schedules, member benefits, plus a lot of free merchandise. And this platform will launch you to a meaningful life after 55. And now, Florence Ann Romano is back.
Hello. Okay, so we're back. All right, so I've been thinking about you guys during this commercial break a little bit about what exactly we can do to help create these boundaries, actually give you like solid suggestions instead of just be like, oh, I hope it works out and just be understanding. And all those things are true. Yes, you have to have those values as part of it, but it's more so about actionable things. So Andy, so let's go to some questions from the viewers.
Okay, and I just had to chuckle when you were talking about the four-letter words. My grandkids kind of, when they have big ears and they hear anything and they say, uh-oh, they remind us not to do that.
Can I tell you that my youngest sister was so fearful and so phobic of swearing that she used to say the words in her head to make sure she wouldn't say them out loud. It was like this strangest kind of like way of her, not to say OCD way, but it was almost like she had to go through this litany of words in order to keep herself from saying bad words out loud. So you never know how children are going to process, bad words, good words, what they should say, what they shouldn't say. And it's funny to actually see children decide on a way to censor themselves, which is what she was doing exactly.
That's right. Well, Paul says that he is always complaining to his wife that her mother is being too authoritarian with his kids. He says, how can I ask her to back off?
So I think there's two separate things happening here with Paul. Okay, so if the grandmother is too authoritarian, which I understand, most of the time this is all coming from love. Let's be honest. A lot of the time they are very well intentioned about what they want to do and how they want to help. But sometimes the delivery is just a little stinky and it's a little icky. So Paul, I would say there's two hurdles here. Are you going to approach your wife about your wife talking to her mother, or are you going to approach your wife and then say, hey, I would like to approach your mother together, or I'd like to express how I'm feeling. I'd like you to go back to your mother and have a conversation. So I'd like to break it down into the different ways you could handle this. I'm not saying one is better than the other, but what I think would be helpful and what I think I'm leaning towards as we're talking through this, Paul, is that you would want to go to your wife and express this to her first, and then go to the grandmother, as long as she's open to it. If you think you have enough of a relationship with her where you could sit down in front of her and she wouldn't feel threatened or she wouldn't feel attacked, and actually just have a conversation about the idea that things are not maybe going exactly the way you would like them to go in your home. And here's my key. You never want to attack or accuse or criticize or embarrass or shame in a way that is not going to be constructive. So when I was a nanny and I would have to approach parents about something that I saw going on with their children, I never wanted to go to them and be like, hey, you're like the worst parents in the world, and I've never seen this problem before, and wow, you need to really fix this, messing your kids up. I mean, that's not the way to go. So you have to really think about catching more flies with honey. You've got to take it back and think, okay, let's use this as an example, Paul. They're feeding the kids too many sweets. And you're like, I need to deal with this. So you go and say, oh my gosh, I know these kids love you so much and they love getting these treats and this fun from you, because I know you want them to feel spoiled and to feel loved and get a little bit, get a perk of being with you, Grandma. But, the too much sugar kind of spins them into this crazy behavior. And we just need to keep things consistent, especially when they're in school and there are bedtimes and they have to focus on homework. Approaching it in that way, giving actual examples of why you want to limit that sugar intake, and not saying it's your fault, you're doing this wrong. It's that we as a family just try to do it because here are the things that are the consequences of that. And we just want to try to keep things as consistent as we can in the home, and it's never all or nothing. It's never, okay, they're giving them too many sweets, so now we're taking away all the sweets. It's never that. It's finding that balance, finding that happy medium. And this authoritarian concept that you were talking about with the grandmother, I'd be interested to know if that has to do with punishment, perhaps. And is she punishing the children where you don't agree with the type of punishing that she's doing, or you don't want her to be disciplining the kids at all? No grounding, no spanking or anything like that. If that's an issue that you're dealing with, that her disciplining is not in line with what you and your wife are doing in the home, it's not consistent, it's not an extension of you guys, then that needs to be addressed too. And sometimes it just needs to be a simple clarification about how things are done in the home. And it doesn't need to be a big fight. But again, present it is the most important thing.
Well, Florence Ann, this one is kind of right out of the times we're in right now. Joan is having a virtual party for her son, and her husband's mother insists on being in on the Zoom, call or celebration. And Joan, and she can't understand why she wants to be included, and he wants to axe her.
From a children's birthday party? Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Well, I can understand wanting to be part of it as a grandparent, getting to see that joy. But I also understand that it might just be for friends. And I think that that's okay too. I think a good compromise would be to celebrate the child's birthday maybe multiple times. And maybe that's too much work on the parents' part. I'm not saying throw separate parties, but I think what we're hearing here is that the grandparent just wants to be able to be included in that celebration and watch that joy, watch that fun, watch that excitement. So as long as you are going to include the grandparent in some way celebrating the child's birthday, I don't think it has to be that specific day if it is just going to be for friends. But I do think that grandparents live for these moments. And so if it's not going to disrupt, if she's not going to sit there and chime in and try to take the spotlight away from her grandchild, then just being an observer, that I think that's a perfectly acceptable way to include her. But if you're really against having any grandparents there and it's really just for children, then I think of an alternative way to celebrate the birthday so that they do get to make that memory. Right now, because of the times, I think grandparents and just people in general are feeling so isolated and feeling so removed from joyful moments. And I think we need to try to give people as much feeling of normalcy as we can, especially in these moments that might seem so small. But these small moments right now are part of the survival. So I'd pick and choose the argument that you're going to make, and maybe make a compromise about the interaction that the grandparent has during the Zoom. But if you can make that compromise saying you can be included, but really let it be about the kids, I think that would be a healthy compromise.
Can we sneak one last one in here? Yeah. This is another one of those like who's in charge questions. Stephanie says her husband's dad wants to push too much of his religion on her young kids. Stephanie says she's not comfortable with that, but is afraid to say anything.
That's a hard one because I do see parents who have raised their children a certain religion or have a certain spirituality or faith or whatever it might be. And then they grow up and they start to discover what faith means to them or their religion means to them in a different idiom than perhaps they were raised. And it's hard for the grandparents to see their children not approaching religion the same way that they did. And I understand why, Stephanie, why you would want to monitor what it is that the grandparent is dispensing in terms of religious talk or advice or things like that. I think it's definitely a conversation you need to have. I don't think it's hurtful. I think if you can approach it with what your feelings about religion are, whatever they might be, and express how it is that you're looking to raise your children regarding that denomination or regarding those philosophies, I think it needs to start with you. I think you need to say, this is what we as a family believe, and this is how we're looking to raise our children. And maybe the grandparent can offer a complement to something in that way, or enhance some of the teachings you're teaching in your home, even if it's not 100% what they would want you to do or how you or your husband was necessarily raised, but there's a coloring of it. There's a complement to it. I think that's a compromise, but there's no way to find out how you can incorporate the grandparents' beliefs and wisdom unless you're going to have a heart-to-heart with them about what it is that you expect from your children as you're raising them regarding values and regarding religion. And religion is a hard topic. It's not just you dealing with your parents with it, Stephanie, I would say. It has to do with, it's a question that I see all parents have to deal with when they're hiring a nanny or a babysitter, is actually addressing that question of religion. And I always suggest to parents to bring up religion in interviews with their potential nannies or caretakers, because if you want them to be involved in that part of your child's life, that needs to be an expectation that's made. And if it's not, that also needs to be communicated. So I think you and your husband should sit down and talk about the values of your family from the standpoint of religion and see how that fits in to the grandfathers. And if there is a complement there, and have a conversation with him about how you guys feel, what you're looking to accomplish, and then see if there's a way to incorporate grandfather into being an extension of your family's values.
Well, that's what we have for today. Can you come right back? We'll just take a break and let people know how to reach you, and
Yep.
any final comments. Just one
Sounds
moment.
great.
Okay. You're watching Boomer TV, and today's show, Calling All Grandparents. Your help is needed. Your host is Florence Ann Romano, the Windy City Nanny. Let's get back to Florence Ann.
It has been such fun today. I love your questions. You know, they're so real, and it makes me feel so good also to know that what you're experiencing is really is the real stuff. It's the real deal. It's what's being repeated in so many homes throughout our country. And I hope you feel like you're not alone in it. So many people are also, swirling in their heads about these different things and, how to address something, when not to say something. There's so much thinking that goes into it. There's so much feeling that goes into it. So I want you to feel connected to me, and to also everybody else, to the community, to the village, knowing that these are topics that everyone is trying to address, and also trying to gain clarity on, and then also be able to solve. So I hope that's what we're doing here too, is solving these itty bitty problems, or these bigger problems as they come. And it's been such an honor to be able to talk through this, and to be able to take it back to other people, other parents, other grandparents that I talk to as well, and validating their feelings about what you guys are all experiencing. So, until next time, which we are going to talk about personal life and being a caretaker. And how do you balance your personal life and being a caretaker? I mean, how do you balance, your personal life and your career and everything else, honestly, in general? Isn't that the question du jour in life, is balance? How do you find balance? And I have some ideas about balance. It's not the most traditional way, I think, but I have found in my life, and as I get older and older, that that word balance has a lot of different meanings. And so we're going to explore that. But I would love to hear from you anytime, every time. You can find me on social media, Instagram, Facebook, Nanny. You can go to my website, windycitynanny.com. I have blogs galore to help you out in your parenting and grandparenting journey. I love to hear from everyone. If you DM me on Instagram, I will write you back, and we will have a chat. There is no question too little or too big for us to tackle together. And remember, you are not in it alone. One of my favorite quotes is have courage and be kind. And man, I think that was probably written with families in mind, because isn't that the way we need to treat each other? You should have courage to say the things you need to say, to stand up for yourself and for your family, but being kind about how you say it, that's so important too. That's probably the most important part about it. It's all about delivery and putting yourself in other people's shoes and finding that empathy. So until next time, my loves, have courage and be kind.
Thank you, Florence Ann. And Florence Ann Romano, the Windy City Nanny. And you can find out more on Facebook, YouTube, and at bloomerboomer.com. And if you like this, well, please like us on Facebook and follow us there. Meanwhile, come aboard and join the Bloomer Boomer community. Register on the website and get updates, show schedules, and qualify for member benefits.